protest and destruction of such properties, both federal-owned properties, business enterprises, and all that, occasions like this?
Well, it's quite unfortunate that the nation is going through this harsh periods, which is very most regrettable, because looking at these incidents that occurred on the 20th 10 2020 is a black day. I commiserate with my fellow colleagues, the Nigerian youth. We've lost enough. We've lost enough, and I pray we don't go beyond how much we have lost in terms of lives, in terms of properties, in terms of things and demands that we have always been fighting for many years. Because if we keep destroying more, it will take us a number of years when we eventually assume leadership of this country, which I believe strongly our time is near. Be that as it may, in view of your question, the EndSARS protest was not riotous from beginning, and even till what happened in Lekki, it was acclaimed as still peaceful. And nationally and internationally, in view of the skirmishes of challenges that we had in some states, in view of the infiltrations by the agent provocateurs, we still believe that the demands of the EndSARS is for national development. It's aimed at seeking a conversation, hearing from a leader that we all elected. In a sovereign society, there is a need for communication, in view of the fact that there has not been this kind of robust communication all along. We find it very difficult, whereby we need to beg. It was at the kneel of begging for Mr. President to address us on the 20th of October. The hell was let loose by some military men, and as a date, that on its own is not yet featured in Mr. President's speech, that a commission of inquiry, an advanced team of cerebral mind ought to have been appointed at yesterday to really look at the intricacies, the causal link, who and who should be held responsible, because it behoves on Mr. President, and he will be vicariously liable for anything that happens, because the buck stops on the president's table.
Did you get my question?
Yes, ma'am.
We are counting the losses, and I'm glad you expressed this guts at the wanton destruction of property and lives, if you understand me. Earlier on, the former deputy governor talked about the correlation between the destruction of properties like Aba Town Hall, for instance. Yeah. What has Aba Town Hall got to do with the legitimate agitation of the youth? What has the BRT buses, for instance, the BRT buses that is meant for public use, for you and I, for the use of the youth, what has it got to do with the legitimate, demands, 5 for 5 demands of the youth, for instance? And you are a youth leader.
Yeah. Well, the situation we find ourselves, if you go to Lagos today, beyond the Aba Town Hall destruction, palaces along Ibeju-Lekki of even invasion into the harbor of Lagos Palace, a whole lot that has no correlation with the demand of the protest occurred. It occurred out of fact that the perpetrators of these hills are, as a date now, are different youths across the nation. Out of frustration, I believe a whole lot had occurred. It is not the EndSARS protesters, in view of the fact that we saw practically those that were participating in the EndSARS protest. But when it got to that height of provocation from an infiltration, because I'll call it infiltration, by some people, some element, and that is why we need to separate the wheat from the chaff. We cannot have a covering the field approach to define that destruction as it is an EndSARS consequence of an NSAS destruction holistically. That is a reason why we condemn it. We condemn it as an organization and individually. And that's one critical areas now that we really need to jointly address now. These are times that we need to appeal. These are times that we need to begin to show courage. It is not only Mr. President that all leaders need to rise up in unison together. Because if you leave everything to Mr. President to address, there's a lot is needful at this time. The destruction is, the magnitude of the destruction is irreplaceable at the moment. The only thing we need to do now is not to begin to, if we begin to count the losses are huge enough, maybe built on human lives and material. But irrespective of that, we need a situation for dialogue, for conversation, for all of us to really come back to the table. Because if we continue to leave it the way it's going, we might eventually have an inevitable situation that will not be better for all of us.
All right, thank you very much, Oladotun Hassan. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's get back to Francis Ewerido, whom we earlier introduced. You're seeing there on the right side of your screen. He's an insurance broker. Francis, just before we get into the nitty-gritty of how much of a nightmare the looting and destruction mean to insurance companies after the dust settles, I know that you maintain a column in the Vanguard where you write about family issues and indeed society in general. How can you contextualize what we are seeing, particularly as hoodlums and miscreants have taken over what used to be peaceful protest by young persons who were calling for the end to SARS? If you can hear me, I understand that your system is freezing, but if it's been... all right, Francis? All right. Once that is cleared up, we'll return to you, Francis. Let's come back to our studios here. Kabiru, there are a number of issues to take a look at in terms of counting the cost. Some of them have been horrendous, others just simply horrific. Policemen have been dragged out of police stations and lynched in Lagos and Ibadan. And that's where police stations have been set ablaze. There have incidents of jailbreaks. The president identified 2 major jailbreaks. That's again choice of words, 2 major. Then we had a jailbreak in Ondo. Then we also had an attempt in Warri. That's Okere prison in Warri. And I think there was one also somewhere in the southeast, maybe Abakaliki or so. What are we faced with in terms of all of these unintended consequences of the peaceful, harsh and SARS protests? What are we faced with now?
I would start with saying that perhaps it was not unintended. Now I'm speaking as an intelligence specialist. What we saw is a theory of anarchy. It appears it was scripted. The youths had a legitimate demand. They came out to protest, and then the author of that script hijacked the process. The moment Edo happened, the red flags went up for me. And I related it with the George Floyd movement in the US and how President Trump came up with the theory that anarchists were driving. And to an extent, he was right, because we saw how legitimate protest turned into violence, where economic institutions were being attacked and destroyed. So clearly, something like that occurred here in Nigeria. In the field of economic, Lagos Chambers of Commerce and Industry came out with a figure after 12 days of the protest, saying that 700 billion naira had been lost to the protest. And that is just for them. I know that Ghanaian traders and other members of ECOWAS had also complained about how their inability to conduct business with Nigeria as a result of the protest. Now, individually, just like my co-discussant had mentioned, people had also suffered personally and sometimes by the loss of their inability to go out and fend for their day-to-day living. Now, that is not to even include the cost of the properties that were destroyed. The MPA building as an example. And then several other buildings, the Obas Palace. Look at the traditional institution that has been,
Yes.
I'm sorry to say, ridiculed. How do you recover from that? So in that area of economy, it's significant. The other area that we're not yet talking about, for me, is in our national strategic outlook. How come it seemed that we were blindsided by all of this? We were not prepared to counter the enormity of such a social movement and its consequences on us as a nation. So I'm hoping that as part of recounting the cost, we would look at our intelligence community as a whole and ask critical questions, just like the US did after 9/11. Ask critical questions regarding the efficiency, effectiveness of our intelligence community. Were there issues that happened in the past that has prevented that intelligence agency from performing its duties in a manner that would have anticipated this theory of anarchy that I've mentioned and then put in place measures. The third one, which is very, very important, is the cyberspace. The cost of our neglect of the cyberspace is what we are seeing today. The mobilization that happened in the cyberspace. I talked of 145 million naira generated by just one of the groups that funded the protest, the Feminist Coalition. They raised it through the cyberspace. Initially, they were doing it through Flutterwave. It was shut down, and then they moved to the cyberspace. Some even said they did it through the dark web. Now, what happened? How come as a nation we do not have that kind of capability to look into that space and then come up? Now, the consequence in terms of cost is, let's remember that even as we're talking now, ahead of the US elections, the US intelligence has claimed that Iran and Russia are interfering in the US election through the cyberspace. How are we beginning to contend with the fact that it's a possibility that can happen in Nigeria? So I'll add that to the cost. There are so many areas that we can look at the cost of the protest and the consequences for us as a nation. The fourth one that is also very, very important is the loss that we may have suffered in the international community. And the president spoke to it about it in his speech when he asked our neighbors to be a bit cautious in reaching conclusions. Now, unfortunately, I would just cite one example. In the UK Parliament, someone began a move through this website called Change and got signatures. At the last time I checked, the person had 300,000 signatures, which mandated the US Parliament to look into the issue in Nigeria. That is a diplomatic loss for us. And unfortunately, the kind of strategic countering of that kind of move, I didn't see it. So hopefully, just like he has mentioned, going forward, those are the kind of proactive measures that I think we need to take to check the consequences of some of these actions, because there will be an impact, definitely, on us. Already the UN has issued a speech. The last time the UN issued a speech on extrajudicial killings in Nigeria, there is one phrase that the UN used that is still boggling me in my head. That the phrase is that we're presiding over an injustice pressure cooker in Nigeria.
Okay, let's bring in Deputy Governor before we go to our guest on Zoom. Dr. Kabir Adamu says is a scripted theory of anarchy. What's your comment?
You see, in this life, whatever you do must be done in moderation. We say it in our local parlance that too much of everything is too bad. The EndSARS protesters started the movement and then presented 5 demands. Government accepted and started action. The statement and he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day is not cowardice. You go back to strategize. Now you ask for 5 things. Things have started happening. We should have gone back. The protesters have gone back to now begin to strategize on how to make sure that these 5 demands are carried through. And not to say we remain on the streets. And that's where the whole thing is more than meets the eye. People, I use the word that the bad thing is to become an instrument such that in the course of fighting injustice, you now become the instrument that will make others suffer injustice. And that was what happened. People, we are all talking about what happened at the Lekki toll gate, and we condemn it in all its entirety. But like I said, we still haven't gotten the real facts, and so we wait for that. Be that as it may, people should know that before Lagos State Governor declared a curfew, that something triggered it. When in Benin City, 2 correctional centers were invaded and prisoners, hardened criminals, were released. It happened also, is it in Sapele or so? So other governors and governments started taking actions to prevent such things, which, if you follow through, you can see the attempt, even in Lagos, to also do the same thing, and other places. It means, like Dr. Kabir said, there has been a script. Someone is making people play their script without even knowing or understand the import of what they have been doing. So the problem is that when you start a thing and get attention, you pull back and re-strategize. But that was not done. Now, the challenge that we all have now is how to ensure that this violence is nipped on the bud. If there was no curfew, probably that wouldn't have happened. But is it also right and proper for a citizen, a responsible citizen of this nation, to disobey simple government, directive to ensure the safety of all? Curfew was pronounced because situation had become tense and fluid. So to now say we must, it's like saying anarchy everywhere, no governance. And you can't pretend over such a situation and just keep quiet and watch people do whatever they like. Be that as it may, the style and measures taken to control that may have. Now, look at where Lekki Gate is. See where the palace of the Oba of Lagos is. A revered palace, desecrated. And so many things that happened. So, effectively, there is more to the whole thing than meets the eye. And I want to remind us here as Nigerians to think back. Whether if people think somebody from somewhere is coming to help you make your country better, it's a lie. Any little thing, hey, don't give people visa, don't do this, don't do that. I wonder, for me, if I will only go out when it is absolutely necessary. I don't have to. Because this country is good. And we are rich. It's just that we've not been able to, So, let us think of Libya. The ordinary man on the streets of Libya today, I have friends there who even were appointed into the government after Gaddafi. Very close friends. Well, some of them that brought back everybody and had to leave and move to Germany, resigned their position because of anarchy. Let us think of Sudan. Let's look at Yemen. Let us look at what's happening in Iraq, in Syria. People will tell you we are coming to help you. Nobody is coming to help you. You have to help yourself. And the only way to help ourselves is to forgive each other. To now think of the best way to understand each other and move forward together. Why am I saying this? In today's Nigeria, at least, there is freedom of expression. There is also a process for a regime change. You don't come and use a movement for NSAS as a subterfuge to change a regime. When we have a process, this is a democratic process in place. And I urge our youth to get in more. There are many of them now in the system, to get in more so that we can understand what is involved in governance and what is involved in leadership. When you come up with a movement and you say you have no leader, what do you expect? If you don't have a leader, you can't have loyal followers. Because why are people afraid to lead? If you have been able to organize a movement, come out and lead that movement so that people can interface. Government can interface. Other people interested can interface. And when you speak, people will know that this is the authentic voice. Part of the problem was that there was no authentic voice. So we are talking about Lekki Ghetto. We are not happy about it. But something triggered it. And what triggered it was what happened in Benin. The governor there declared coffee. And then, Sanwo-Olu, being a proactive governor, you saw what he did with the COVID-19. Every time he is, up. So he moved. And then declared a coffee. Why should we consciously, as responsible citizens, disobey that?
If you look at the composition of those who have carried out these acts, and you look at the swiftness in the way the thing, it would appear that they're not just hoodlums. They could be working in a networked, I don't know.
That's what we are saying.
Gentlemen,
yes.
We have seen a couple of times Francis Ewerdo pop up back on our screen.
Okay.
His connection froze a while ago. Francis Ewerdo, as I said, you are managing director of Titan Insurance Brokers. We're getting pressed for time. As I said, just before you drill into what this means for the insurance business and therefore compensation for persons who have suffered losses, attention appears to be focused on Lagos, which has been the worst hit. But we also saw here in Abuja, cars were burnt in the Akbo axis and elsewhere in the country. We've also, particularly in the southeast, you've seen banks being destroyed. But you write on family and societal issues. What do you make of what has broken in terms of an otherwise peaceful NSAS protest taken over by miscreants and hoodlums?
I must be personally and all the rest. But
All right, sorry about that. Again, we're trying to rectify the audio connection with our guest in joining us via Zoom. So, Kingsley, I don't know if you want to throw this question.
Well, I just some of the perspectives that have been raised in terms of the cost. When you look at the mayhem that has been wreaked on Lagos, for instance, the Oba of Lagos is a retired Assistant Inspector General of Police. But he did not become Oba of Lagos on account of his having been a former police officer.
Sure.
Oba Oyekon before him ruled for a very long time. And when you see the video footage from the desecration, the question has been asked, what what went on? I don't Oladotun, what went on? It's Oba of Lagos. It's not the palace. Is what just went wrong?
Yes, well, it's quite
And then they
unfortunate.
took his staff of office.
Yes, it's quite unfortunate that
His footwear.
our generation is fast becoming lacking in morals, in integrity, in what's really presumed to be maybe the value chain from the family background to the society is lost, because going into the Oba's palace and cutting away the staff of the Oba of Lagos, it's a high desecration. As a Yoruba man, we condemn it in its entirety. For anyone who thinks that that was part of the protest to score a point, have really committed a sacrilege. In view of that, that is where the NOA really needs to come to a action. The National Orientation Agency. There is no more orientation as far as society is concerned. The society is fast tilting into precipice in terms of understanding value system, in terms of building communal strength. You know, this has really exposed us into our real nature, that we are really yet to understand what democracy is all about. Do we really have the history? I appreciate His Excellency when he was acknowledging the fact that the study of history in our curricula is no longer there. If people have learned what
It's
war...
been reintroduced.
Yes, if really understand what war meant, or the consequence of war. In the 60s, no one will dare go into any riot to ignite an inferno of this magnitude. It's really growing higher. And a reprisal is also foreseen in the coming days. If it continues this way, we might be welcoming a large pool of another crisis that will stare us in the face. That is the more reason why we are using this opportunity to appeal to our youth, that it is high time we stop further issues that has really snowballed into mass destruction. As far as we are concerned, it's not only the Oba of Lagos Palace, the Elemoro in Ibeju's palace was burned down. The Area J new police station was burned down. All these things are government facilities. If the government needs to act as a reprisal against this, we are going to be losing more than what we lost in Lekki Tollgate. This is where we need to really come up with how best do we really now move out of the hoods, by advising the government. For the fact that Mr. President have not come to point to meeting us to where we expect, we should be able to also profile to Mr. President that this is the way we want to be addressed. Let Mr. President jointly move the nation with mediators with high credibility. We have the Chief Olusegun Obasanjo there, Oni of Ife there, the former president, maybe Goodluck Ebele Jonathan are there. These are leaders. It needs to really rally together, and the Council of State needs to come on board. This is a national interest beyond the nationals, beyond rhetorics.
But some of the youths may also belong to your council. You are the president of the Yoruba Council of Youth. So.
Yes, definitely. We mentioned that we all started this together. But when it got to a point whereby we are now losing the gap of support in terms of moral support that we advised as at last Thursday. I foresee this. I rallied around the Ohanaeze Ndigbo Youth Council president and all other leadership that we have. We came into Abuja since last Thursday. I ought to have returned back to Southwest. But we waited to address a press conference in order to appeal to the youth that as at the level we are, this is a red flag for the miscreant to have infiltrated this ongoing peaceful move. There is a need for us to retreat and give the government ultimatum in order to also have a developed and pragmatic solutions to our demands. And thereby, we use the opportunity to also front other demands like the National Youth Development Commission, the Youth Rights Act, Education Rights Act, so that holistically our challenges can be addressed by virtue of this open opportunity for the first time.
Before we go to join our guests from via Zoom, the president listed a number of initiatives and programs that this government has put in place for the youths. How well do your members or do you youth leaders, how have you educated your members to take advantage of these opportunities?
I must admit here, we have tried all means, and I'm putting it to Mr. President. All those programs of the presidency is not directly accessible to the youth. There is no chain of communication of where are you going to address this, how do we do this, or who is committed in this line. Though the government did not put up a catalog of how to access these opportunities. And in going further, there is a need for us to utilize, since Mr. President mentioned all this yesterday, we hope that different agencies concerned with this open opportunity must change the paradigm of meeting the yearnings of the youth. There is poverty in the land, unemployment is in the land. There is a need for us to create a connect with government. Government needs to really show that fatherly figure now. These are not time. We know the excesses are really far beyond control, but we seek for forgiveness of Mr. President not to unleash that last drop of authority, of letting it look like a state of emergency, because this is imminent. The president can invoke that state of emergency as at the time we are going, which will not really earn us that prime of space that Nigeria has been enjoying all along. Our giant of Africa can be deflated in a matter of days if you don't manage this thing collectively. So I'm only appealing that the federal government needs to come up with the economic plan, the social welfare plan. Everything must be immediate. There's a lot of things that ignited the crisis. The fuel increment, cost maturity, all these issues. Mr. President can go beyond the limit by reducing the fuel subsidy to 65 naira. Do all other things that can calm the nerves. These are it might be very maybe coming at this time, but our demand is for good governance.
President Hassan,
and I believe strongly we are appealing that Mr. President should welcome the youth for a dialogue. It's high time he select critical stakeholders, and we have appealed. He alone cannot do it. Let him appoint mediators. We've nominated mediators of high credibility. The Obi of Onitsha is there. The Oni of Ife is there. We have the Sultan of Sokoto. These are leaders of high respect. It's high time they move in with the Mr. President and let us resolve this on a ADR mechanism level so that we can jointly assess our losses and jointly move the nation out of the woods together.
Thank you. Kingsley.
Francis Awerido, if you are there, just take up from where you thought you stopped. Well, it's some static noise, but we can hear you still.
Maybe you should take off his hands-free and just speak free.
Well,
what as process that may have.
Well, it looks like, Francis, it looks like it's a bad day to have you with us. All right, Francis Awerido, we apologize. I think that the elements were not favorable for us to get your views. Some other time we'll take advantage of that. Let's return to our studios here. Dr. Kabir Adamu. Dr. Kabir Adamu, there are some issues that we're talking about. Yesterday, the Edo State governor had a meeting with some select representatives of youth, National Youth Council, and a whole range of other persons would say go forward. He's also issued an ultimatum to the prisoners who broke free from the two jail houses to get back, otherwise they will be fished out. But we have seen other prisoners escape from other jails, and we have seen police stations being raised. One thing, the police authorities are not here with us, but there appears to be the impression that some policemen actually fear for their lives to be on the beat right now. The Inspector General of Police has already ordered the deployment of the anti-riot squad, but anti-riot policemen are only few in number. Let's face it, you have regular policemen. And in Lagos, no fewer than 10 police stations have already been raised. What does this mean to our law enforcement? Because all around in different parts of Lagos, highbrow, lowbrow, and mid-brow locations, the thugs are just on the rampage.
You've raised a very critical question that requires both immediate and long-term solution. We were faced with a situation where we had not enough resources, as it were, for security agencies, even before the protest started. In fact, one of the reasons for the protest was because of the perceived low salary and other bad conditions for the security agencies. And then as a fallout, and I say this consciously, a fallout of the protest is that strategic facilities of the security agencies are being destroyed. So we're going to come out of this, or we're coming out of it, unfortunately, worse off than we started. And the good news is that there is a platform to assist in taking care of this, the Police Trust Fund Act 2019, for which the board and the chairman is already on seat and they are working. Former IG Abba Suleiman is responsible for that board, and I know hopefully he would address the three basic responsibilities of that fund: training for the police, their welfare, and then facilities for the police. The model that the Lagos state government used in its security trust fund is a veritable model for Abba Suleiman to use. And I urge him, if he listens to this, to look closely at that model. It's a transparent process that hopefully would create for us the right facilities. As ironic as this statement may sound, what we had before in terms of our police stations and divisions were not what we wanted. So perhaps we can pick up from there, create a model police station, police division, and then use the available resources, because there is a lot of resources that will go to the trust fund. The profit from companies, individuals, name them, even our international partners are going to, assist in the funding for the trust fund. So it can be used to develop that. Bottom line is that our security agencies have been affected, unfortunately. And part of the irony for me is that even where there is a curfew, we saw hoodlums moving around in Lagos and doing the destructions, mainly because, unfortunately, the security agencies that were to enforce the curfew were incapacitated, as it were. So as part of counting the cost, I think there is a need to review His Excellency talked about it, the collaboration between the federal and the state government. It's easy for us to say, well, all of these agencies are federal agencies. But we know, for instance, that even at the regional or state level, in the southwest, there is the Operation Amotekun. Lagos has its neighborhood watch. It calls. So what happened to all of that? If the federal agencies were not effective, as it were, what of the state level initiatives? How come they were not effective? So honestly, this for me is an opportunity for us to look at ourselves in the mirror and tell ourselves the truth, the effectiveness and functionality of these agencies that we, every year, monies are voted for. Unfortunately, it has been shown clearly that there are gaps, and this is an opportunity for us to address those gaps.
All right, Ted. Yeah, Dr. Governor, would it be out of place to ask for compensation for those who, have lost one thing or the other? I don't know, and how can that be addressed?
Thank you. Dr. Kabir mentioned as at the 12th day of the protest, Lagos Chamber of Commerce did say that Lagos have lost over 700 billion. I listened to Dr. Onyekwere yesterday, putting cost of over 1 trillion. And that was before the continued issues. The cost and what has happened is really not quantifiable. The most damaging thing is investors' confidence that have been eroded. I mean, when you go and burn malls, try to get into estates,
Car stands,
petrol stations,
shops,
vehicles, and all sorts of private businesses, and people invested. So the VGC had a Herculean task, keeping them away from getting into the estate. The Chicken Republic just across was destroyed. That's private business, and people work there. They have lost their source of livelihood. So it's a huge cost. Like I said, at this point, we must do everything necessary to bring back peace. If not, you can't say of total peace, a semblance of peace and reason, so that people can sit, talk, and work together towards achieving the desired peace. And part of that will be compensation. Talking of insurance, unless if our insurance companies in Nigeria have changed their styles, you insure something, you only get to know later when things like this happen, that riot, this, that are excluded. And these things discourage people from taking insurance. You pay premium over the years, and when there is a loss, they will show you, and you know their forms are usually, and they write those things in very small letters.
Small print.
Very small print. So, unless if they've changed that now. So, it is all part of it. And that is why you see people, Kingsley, you remember in those days, before you are allowed to take a car loan, you must sign to taking comprehensive insurance.
That's right.
Otherwise, you will take a third party because of this lack of commitment by the insurance companies. But over the years, we have moved the NDIC, all that, the regulatory bodies have tried. I'm not sure of this aspect of riots and what they call natural causes. So compensation is necessary. The government, I keep saying the government because that is where is the welfare, security and welfare of the people, must find a way. I was happy when I listened to the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory yesterday.
You must round off your thoughts.
Okay, visiting places, and he talked about compensation as much as the people. That should be the approach, so that people can get some hope. People that are crying for destructions of the compensation is necessary, and let us work together to move forward. Well, so many things to talk about.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't have the benefit of Werido's contribution on the insurance side. But as you said, most likely have the opportunity of dealing with that sometime in the future. But I think that we would like to appreciate our guests this morning. Dr. Chris Akomas, former Deputy Governor of Abia State. We'd like to thank you for being around. Dr. Kabir Adamo, Security Risk Expert, and our regular guest in Good Morning Nigeria. Thanks for being with us. Oladotun Hassan, who is President, Yoruba Council of Youth. We appreciate you. Unfortunately, Francis Ewerido, we could hardly hear him. He's an insurance broker. But let people just be careful for those who are still out there on the street. When you are rioting and looting, the standard operating procedure is for the law enforcement agencies to neutralize you. It's different from a peaceful protest. And I think that point has to be re-emphasized. On that note, we thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We are back on Monday, same time, 7 in the morning. Until then, have a nice weekend. I'm Kingsley Salama.
I am Claire Adelabu Abdul-Razak. Do please stay safe. Bye-bye.
Films, Facebook at NTA Network News, Instagram at NTA Network, Twitter at NTA News Now, YouTube at NTA News Online, or visit www.nta.ng. For live streaming, visit www.nta.ng/live. Now, you can stay updated on the go, be it on your TV, iPhone, laptop, or iPad, or download the NTA mobile application from your Play Store or App Store. NTA, you can beat the rich.
NTA News. When the news breaks, we mend it and present it without blemish. NTA News, authentic and authoritative.
This is the network service of the NTA.